I look at the Penn State uniforms, and some people think they're the ugliest things ever. And in some respects, they are. I mean, they look like practice uniforms, but those uniforms are beautiful to every guy who ever played in them because what they signify. No names on the back of the jerseys, black cleats, very plain, nothing on the helmet. It was because it was all about the team. It wasn't about you. And really, if you're going to thrive in a team environment where it means putting your desires at times on the altar, so to speak, for the sake of the greater good, I mean, you need people with a team mentality. So, one story that I think is great, though, in regards to attentiveness to detail is that people seem to enjoy is, Joe Paterno, he got to Penn State in 1948. I arrived in 1994. I thought he was an old man at that time. He went on to coach he was there for 60 some years. I mean, we're probably never going to see anything like that again. And Joe was just an outstanding coach, an amazing human being, and a great mentor of young men. And when I'll never forget the story he told about the Immaculate Reception. Now, you guys know who made the Immaculate Reception.
Oh, yeah, Franco, baby.
Franco Harris. You're a Steeler fan. You didn't know that, I would have given you an F for fandom.
I think my dad would have disowned me.
Yeah, I bet he would. Is he on the call right now?
He is.
Okay, good. Well, he's going to enjoy this story. So, we were sitting there in a squad meeting one day, and Joe starts telling the story. He goes, that catch that Franco made. Joe had a high-pitched Brooklyn accent. Every single player that ever played for him can imitate this voice I'm doing for you right now. Like, let me tell you something about that catch. And he goes back in the history to when Franco Harris arrived on campus. Franco was a young, talented player. He was big and strong, and I've met Franco, and I've verified this story. Franco's like almost my size. I'm 6'6", 280 pounds. Franco's probably 6'4", and when he played, probably 230. That was a monster back in the 1970s. When Franco arrived on campus at Penn State, though, he was a very raw player, like all guys coming out of high school. He wasn't polished. And when Franco had the ball in his hands, and he would come alive. He could make you miss. He could run through you. He could outrun you, whatever. He had speed, strength, and jukes, everything else. But when he didn't have the ball in his hands, he was somewhat undisciplined. He didn't always do the little things right. One thing Joe Paterno was a stickler for everybody on his team to do, linemen, other receivers, when the ball was thrown downfield, forward pass, everybody, he wanted them all to run to the ball. And he noticed that Franco would just kind of be lollygagging along, watching the ball in the air. He'd say, Franco, what are you doing? You might as well be taking tickets in the stands. Go to the ball, Franco. Go to the ball. So, and he was on Franco constantly because Franco would just be lollygagging and he would just be on him. His freshman and sophomore year, and who likes to be embarrassed in front of your teammates, in front of your peers? Nobody, So right. Finally, it just becomes a thing that Franco does. Or, Joe will catch him in practice one more time. Come on, Franco, how many times I got to tell you to go to the ball? So eventually it just becomes who Franco is. By his junior and senior year, when that ball is thrown downfield, because, you think about it. When a ball is thrown downfield, some good things can happen. Receiver can catch it for a first down or a touchdown, but a lot of bad things can happen too. There can be an interception. Receiver could catch it and fumble it. Ball could be tipped up in the air, and then it's anybody's ball. So that's why he wanted all his players down around that ball. Good thing has happened, the more of your team's color you have around the ball. So it just became a part of his ingrained habits. So fast forward a number of years, and the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I've talked to NFL players from back in the era of when the Steelers were just building their franchise. They brought in a young coach named Chuck Noll, and they were the perennial doormat of the NFL, though, the Steelers. You pretty much chalked it up as a win back in the 60s when you had the Steelers on your schedule. But then Noll comes in, he starts drafting household names like Jack Lambert, Jack Ham, Mean Joe Green, Lynn Swann, Terry Bradshaw, and Franco Harris. He brings all these young guys together from all over the country, different colleges, and by the early 1970s, they start making a splash. They start making a name for themselves in the NFL, and really, he wanted to build a tough football team that was strong defensively, and he was doing a great job of bringing the talent in that he had. But the two bullies in the AFC at that time, they were going to prevent the Steelers from getting to the Super Bowl, were the John Madden coached Oakland Raiders and the Miami Dolphins coached by Don Shula. Don Shula's Dolphins, 1972, they went undefeated. So those were the two teams that Steelers were going to have to get through if they wanted to go to the big dance and have a chance at the championship. So as it turns out, the Raiders come to town for a playoff game in Three River Stadium, and gets down to the end of the game, minute and a half left, and it's basically a desperate situation. I think the Steelers are down by 5 points. They need a touchdown, very little time left. So Terry Bradshaw's just going to drop back and heave a desperation pass downfield. So he throws the ball downfield to a guy named Frenchie Fuqua, with a great football name, And Jack Tatum, defensive back for the Oakland Raiders, he jumps up and tries to hammer the ball down into the turf. Instead of the ball going into the turf, it starts twirling in the air, though. And what do you, if you can call this thing up, and for everybody that's listening today, I wanted to call it up on YouTube and watch this. You're going to see one person streaking downfield in black and gold, and that was number 32, Franco Harris. He runs downfield. I like to use body language with this story. I can show my hands. Like, he scoops the ball up literally like only a foot from the turf. Many Raiders fans think it hit the turf, but the instant replay didn't show, and they didn't have instant replay back then anyway. So the refs called it a good catch. He streaks down the field, and Joe Paterno brings us back in that moment as he's telling us the story. He says, "What do you think he heard in his head when that ball was in the air downfield? He heard me yelling, 'Go to the ball, Franco! Go to the ball!'" Franco picks it up, runs down the field, scores a touchdown, and gets the Steelers over those bullies. Now you look back on these guys and the fact that they won all these championships and household names and Hall of Fame players, but it took some big play to be made by one guy during a critical situation. And that, you don't know when that critical play is going to happen. You don't want your opportunity to make that play is going to happen. But the preparation and the attention to detail that Joe Paterno put Franco Harris through on those practice fields up in, out in the middle of nowhere in State College, Pennsylvania, Happy Valley, Pennsylvania, in the middle of the mountains, the discipline he made him demonstrate on a daily basis and the attention to detail is what led to that play, which was a play that then led to a dynasty.